Okay, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 17th African Investigative Journalism 2021. And as you all know, AIJC is organized by the Journalism Department of the Witwatersrand University in Johannesburg, South Africa. And it is the biggest annual gathering of working journalists that gives them an opportunity to share great African work, learn new skills, hear how it is done, and share their experiences. Today's session will be about the role of partnerships and collaborations in investigative journalism by women. And a special thanks to Code for Africa team for making this happen here in Nairobi, and also a special thanks to the wonderful audience that will be following us both virtually and physical. I'm your moderator, Mary Mwendwa, and I'm a journalist based here in Nairobi, and I'm also an editor for an online publication called Talk Africa, owned by the Association of Freelance Journalists. Welcome all. With me are these wonderful ladies who will be joining me on this panel. We have Nancy Aguta from the Radio Africa Group. Nancy. Thank you. We have Linda Ngari from Piga, Firimbi, Africa, Uncensored, Kenya. And finally, we have Cecilia Okoth from our neighboring country, Uganda, from the New Vision.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you so much. And as you all know, the shrink in the African newsrooms budget for investigative journalism has necessitated collaboration with the wide network of organizations and groups. And the impact of this collaborations practice has been transforming the new media landscape. And we all know that women investigative journalists face many challenges in their newsrooms because there are fewer in investigative desks, and without support from collaborative networks, few of them drop off and leave some of these assignments. Now, women journalists are now able to pull together resources, infrastructure, and skills for their investigations. Today's session will explore how journalists and the media are leveraging on partnerships to strengthen their investigative projects. Maybe to start with, I'll start with my friend here, Linda from Piga, Firimbi, Africa Uncensored in Kenya. In 3 minutes, maybe you can share with us your experiences as a woman investigative journalist here in Kenya.
Thank you, Nancy. Happy to be here. Personally, my journey as an investigative journalist began with Africa Uncensored. I initially am there as a fact checker.
Yes.
So as a woman within the organization, I would say being a small team, we've not had so many of the gender discrimination cases within the organization, but the moment when I remember, oh, I'm a woman in this space is probably when, in the process of getting a story, when interacting with sources, when trying to ask questions, then you can get a little bit of gender slurs, but otherwise within the organization, my personal story, not much going on discrimination. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. And Nancy from Radio Africa, you are coming from an active newsroom, maybe which may not be similar to Linda's. Your experiences as an investigative journalist?
Actually, I think a journalist is always an investigative journalist. You don't have really to be maybe specializing in investigative. So for me as a woman journalist, we do so much. Apart from the news stories that happen daily, one of the things that we do are feature stories, and definitely feature stories are investigative stories, because when you go out there, see how things are happening in the society. For example, there's a story I did about agony of stillbirth, and I did it in coordination with Code for Africa. So you find that in as much as I can go and get the content, the Code for Africa is able to get the data, the statistics, that are able to at least point the gaps that are there in that particular story. So as a woman journalist, I don't want to say as a woman investigative journalist, because definitely once you're a journalist, you're an investigative journalist, because in every instance, there's always something that you have to investigate. Even if you look around you, there's just something that you can look and get the answers for. So as a woman journalist, definitely my journey hasn't really been an easy one as well, but in coordination with some of these organizations, it has been smooth for the 7 years I've been at Radio Africa Group.
Thank you, thank you. Cecilia, from the New Vision in Uganda, you've been part of a lot of investigations in your country. Maybe tell us something about your work as an investigative journalist in Uganda.
Thank you. So my work as an investigative journalist did not start from the word go. I joined the newsroom in 2010 and I was still at the university, but when I completed my degree, I came back and freelanced and eventually got onto staff at that New Vision. But my actual journey as an investigative journalist began in 2018, and it only took the belief of one of the editors who maybe saw that I could do something distinct. And so I debuted with a story titled Cancer Patients Bribe for Attention. The question of cancer is, I'm sure, cuts across the pain that patients go through while obtaining treatment in cancer. You know, it's a terminal illness, but then it's an area where you wouldn't expect people to, you know, ask for money, for bribes to get attended to, because that's like adding pain to, you know, an already injured patient. So when my beat has been health and education, crime and human rights, and so I used to frequent the Ministry of Health and the Uganda Cancer Institute whenever there were press conferences. And it's from one of those press conferences that I noticed a lot of patients, you know, on the verandas of the Uganda Cancer Institute, and I was wondering, how come, well, what's actually going on? How come there are many people? So it just took that single detail and curiosity that enabled me pick up the interest in following up what was happening. And then when I went and briefed one of the investigative editors, he told me to pursue it. And it's an investigation that I did for about 4 months, and the feedback and the impact that it created was really amazing. So I was inclined to continue pursuing that path, because journalism is not a money-making profession, but it's the fulfillment you get when you at least are able to help 1 or 2 people get the justice that they deserve.
Oh, thank you, thank you. Collaborations in investigative journalism projects. I know many of these projects, sometimes you want to pursue a story, you do not have enough funding, you do not have enough resources in terms of other skills that are needed. So how have collaborations helped you in investigative journalism? And maybe Nancy, you can touch on that. Have you done any collaborations? How helpful have they been in your work?
Like I said earlier, you know, the journalism that we knew in the yesteryears was that a journalist is always a scooper, or somebody who, you know, goes for exclusive details. But then I think as years go by, you get to understand that you cannot be a loner. Yeah, you need these collaborations, you need these coordinations with organizations. It also depends with the story that you're working on. So for me, I've been working with organizations. We have CSOs, we have human rights groups, we have Code for Africa. You know, as long as you want to have a story that is helpful to the public, you don't have to hide it. So if you have like maybe a pitch, go to Linda, go to, you know, my colleague here, tell them, this is what I'm pursuing, but I'm short of 1 or 2 things. If they're able to give you some details, if they're able to give you financial assistance, if they're able to give you data assistance, there's always something that these organizations can bring on board. You know, this is to be able to, you know, give the public something that they see that the society is, you know, going through. So I think we have moved past the issue of having an exclusive, the issue of having a scoop. We are now in the issue of the public good. So I think I have worked with many organizations. Apart from Code for Africa, I've also worked with Journalists for Human Rights, yeah, because at least in as much as they provide the financial assistance, then they give you some of the CSOs you can work with. They can also help with, making infographics, because our newsrooms are constrained. We don't have the budgets. Yeah. So with the organizations coming on board, you are able to deliver some of these big stories that some of us really, want to do.
Thank you. Linda, from Piga, Firimbi, Africa Uncensored in Kenya. We are talking about these collaborations. Maybe tell us a bit, what specifics in terms of collaborations have you been involved, and was it easy? Was it easy to maybe talk to those partners? How did it go?
I'd just like to build on what my colleague has said in terms of taking a collaborative over competitive approach. In fact, as a fact checker, most of the fake news comes from breaking news. Nowadays, the terms breaking news means trouble. So from what we do, collaborations have especially helped us be able to specialize in what we can do, then bring in, say, Code for Africa to do data analysis. So bringing in different skills together on an organizational point of view and coming up with something that was just a labor of love and brought many people together to give the best quality, I would say is my experience. So as Africa Uncensored, we do have, like the recent investigation was Africa Uncensored as just a small part of a global collaboration for the Pandora Papers. So more of collaborative over competitive efforts. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Even the Pandora Papers is something that was very, very nice in terms of showing how collaborations work, and we saw it being reflected here even on our topmost leader. Thank you so much. Cecilia from Uganda, how have collaborations helped you in your work? And are they working in terms of, in Uganda, are they working? Are there any gaps?
So I think the life of investigative journalism is going to depend a lot on partnerships and collaborations. And I say this because there are certain stories that are too big for one person to accomplish. But then also we have similar challenges and problems that cut across the region and in the continent. So, for instance, if I can speak on the issue of human trafficking, my journey with Code for Africa started in 2019, where I was invited to take part in a training session on anti-human trafficking by the East African Child Rights Network. And it was just a training to help journalists appreciate reporting about children affairs. And so it was in Nairobi. And then it just took one revelation from one of the presenters, Mutuku Nguli, who is the executive director of the Counter Human Trafficking Trust East Africa. He was curious and he said, but Uganda, a lot of your girls are on the streets of Nairobi in the slums. And then we were curious and were like, how come the girls are there? That there are very many Karamojong girls. And so from just that tip-off, I was able, together with my colleague Joseph Kiza, who attended the training as well, to gather more information. And we actually discovered that so many girls were being trafficked from Napak in eastern Uganda to the streets of Nairobi to work for the Somali community specifically. But the challenges they faced in a bid to do the work was really what was shocking. So it's from this collaboration that we were able to dig deeper, and then we gathered information here and then went back home to corroborate it with what was happening in Karamoja. And indeed we discovered that there were certain middlemen, or should I call them middle women, who were selling these girls for as low as, should I say, 300 Kenyan shillings. And so from that investigation, we were able to raise the issue, and it began, and people started talking about it. And it's just from that investigation we did that about 800 girls were rescued back. These are children who are between 8 and 14 years old. They were rescued back and taken back for, rehabilitation. So you can just imagine how the power of collaboration is. If it didn't take a person to speak about it, then we probably wouldn't have known that this vice is happening.
Thank you. Something about cross-border collaborations, maybe journalist to journalist collaborating. I don't know, maybe if any of you has ever done such kind of a story, a cross-border collaboration from a journalist to a journalist. How was it? Did it work? Did you face any challenges? Was it successful? Linda, have you ever done that?
From an individual point of view, no. But maybe as an organization, and the example is with Pandora Papers. So the experience, as well we've seen with the interactions, it brought about a very huge source of data to filter from and things like that. I may not be particularly aware of all the details, but as an organization, especially with that recent investigative piece, cross-border collaborations may just open your eyes beyond, again, just beyond your borders, really.
Oh, thank you, thank you. We'll get back to Nyakerario once her sound is sorted. We were talking about cross-border collaborations, and maybe Nancy, you can tell us if you have ever done any cross-border collaboration. How was it?
Cross-border, I think it has been just in one story that I did. And like I said earlier, it was in coordination with Code for Africa. We had journalists from, I think it was Uganda and Kenya. So it's like a particular team in Uganda is responsible probably for some data statistics on particular topic. And then the team in Nairobi is responsible for collecting certain information. I would say cross-border collaboration is not easy, but like in any investigative piece, it's never easy to bring something that is of quality to the public. It's not easy. Just like the Panama, the Pandora Papers, like I saw somewhere they had like 600 journalists from different countries. So you can imagine if it took them like 2 years to come up with something as earth-shaking as what we've seen around. It is not easy, in as much as it brings issues of convenience, issues of having good quality content. Sometimes one of the key issues is you might not be able to coordinate fully, because sometimes somebody wants to remain with a certain piece of information, the exclusive idea or the exclusive thought that, let me just keep this one, let us finish the other story, then once we've published this, I pick up on this one. So cross-border investigative it has brought challenges in as much as it has gains. So yes, I've done, I think it was one story, I can't just remember the name, but yeah, it has its own challenges as well.
Thank you. Cecilia, cross-border collaborations, have you worked on any?
I haven't, but I would be happy to take part in those, because like I said in my introduction, it's the way to go in investigative journalism. If you could please share my slides, just go to the why we need to partner and collaborate. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. If you could skip to why do we need both partnerships and collaborations. Next slide. Yes. So the reason why we need both collaboration and partnerships is that investigative journalism is an expensive venture, and so it would be very cost-effective working as a team. For instance, when you're investigating in similar challenges like illicit financial flows and maybe cross-border crime. For instance, there's a lot to do with the theft of ivory, charcoal, and other illicit financial flows. So if you put your heads together into one piece, it makes sense and it helps you minimize the costs. But then it also helps you easily access information in a way that we all serve different audiences. And so if you came up with a story idea, Linda from Piga Firimbi would be better placed to tell the story for the Nairobi audience. And so I would also be better placed to tell a story for the Kampala audience. Next slide. And then it also each person's strength. I believe as journalists, we both have strengths. And so if we are to work on investigative pieces, it would really make sense for us to put our heads together and brainstorm on an article. Previous presenters yesterday said that you may not know everything, and therefore the time is right now for us to engage other professionals. For instance, if I'm not strong in data analysis, it does no harm for me to engage a statistician into the team. There are legal implications that are involved in investigative journalism, so it also wouldn't do any harm for us to involve a lawyer. And so it's the issue of working together and collectively that actually brings out a good investigation piece. But then this also helps the team share knowledge on given topics. And then, like I mentioned earlier, some stories are too big to handle by one person. We no longer want to thrive and say, oh, Cecilia came up with this big story. I think the power for us is to say, Linda, Nancy, Cecilia, and Mary came up with a collective piece that, you know, was a blockbuster, and it would actually create more impact. And finally, sources relate easier with women. Women are known to have that touch of patience. If you're investigating a story, women are known to be very patient, but also they take time. We are mothers naturally, so we take time executing work to perfection. And so the strength is in, I think, women investigative journalists. Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Cecilia. What is coming up strongly is about budgets and even sharing of the skills among investigative journalists, hence the need for collaborations at all times. We'll get back to Nyakerario. Let's see if we can get back to her online. Let's try. Nyakerario, can you hear us?
Yes, I'm here.
Hello.
Well, I think the most important aspect of collaborations is to have the work done, because sometimes projects are very big for a single newsroom, and this calls for collaborations to have the work done in a timely manner, no matter how long it takes. I mean, to have the work done, because these projects are really big, and having them executed by one newsroom, it tends to be too much of work, especially for investigative pieces, because we understand they take too much time, they have a lot of work, they require a lot of resources and all that. So, to collaborate for newsrooms with different newsrooms in a country or cross-border countries, I feel to have the work done and to be executed at the best time, it's very important. Yes. So sorry, I didn't get you. Sorry?
Your investigative project, just in 1 minute.
Sorry, come up again. Sorry?
About funding in your investigative projects. Is it ever enough for your work?
Well, yes, it is. I mean, funding investigative projects, I'd say it is enough. It is not there yet, but it is enough. But one of the things that I have noted with investigative journalism and funding is that having grants and fellowships that take up new voices in this field, and having to sponsor them to learn as they do. That is another way of funding investigative projects, to have to train new journalists in a newsroom in new skills, in investigative OSINT skills, to learn as they do. So that is another way of funding, which I have seen is being taken up quite well.
So much. Thank you. Linda, is money enough?
Is money ever enough? I don't think so. But investigative journalism, I think, is one of that kind of work that tends to take more than giving, especially the process of traveling here and there. At times you need protection. So funding, not always adequate, I may say, but again, coming to collaborations, it helps, especially when the agenda is the same. But generating revenue, say, as an individual organization, can be very hectic. Yeah.
Cecilia, I see you want to respond.
Yeah, if the organizers could go back to my slides where I highlight challenges ahead. The issue of money, like my colleague said, will never be enough, but then it gets better when you collaborate. For instance, in Uganda, we've had the Democratic Governance Facility that has deliberately funded investigative work, as well as the African Center for Media Excellence that provides journalists with grants on what they need to do. But then, like I said, money may not be the only issue. There are other challenges and risks ahead that women journalists need to be aware of, and that's the issue of molds, because when you're working as a team, you might find that one person is not on board, and then it therefore helps you to carry out background checks on the people you're going to be able to work with, so that you gain each other's trust. But then we also need to work with credible institutions to be able to execute our work well. And then also, when it comes to the information gathering bit in investigative journalism, this is not information that you're going to just keep anywhere. And so female journalists need to be mindful of where they can be able to keep their information in order to beware of hackers and people that may want to jeopardize your work.
Thank you, Cecilia. Nancy?
Money is never enough. Even in your personal life, it's never enough, yeah? So in a newsroom setup, we have desks, we have gender desks, we have investigative desks, but then you get to understand that sometimes you might have an investigative piece, but there's no funding. So in the newsroom, I can tell you money is never enough there, unless you have a collaboration, unless you reach out to some other people who have the same interest in whatever story you want to carry out. Then from that, you can say, they can be able to come in and fund you. And as Nyakerario said earlier, we also have issues of fellowship, we have issues of grants, which also helps us to have skills. Like basically, I am doing some, Tableau fellowship, which teaches me how to do infographics. So you see, once I get to know how to do that, I'm able to do my own investigative piece using the Tableau software. Thank you.
Any final remarks before we get back to the audience if they have any questions? Maybe Linda?
Probably mine will still be on the money. It's interesting the way journalism is evolving, such that we're not the only ones making the decision. So recently I saw The Continent, which is a South African publication, invite their audience to vote on whether they should take advertising from a major bank. So it was interesting to see that, you may write off the public as just numbers and people who we feed stories, but interestingly, 80% of them were in favor of the media house taking advertising from the major bank, saying that they need to do what they have to do to keep them in business. So also bringing in the public, just including your audience as part of your decision making instead of just writing them off. I thought that was very thoughtful of them to do. Yeah.
I think my parting shot is it's never easy. You don't have to work alone to get work done. In this life, you need a team, and in every job you do, you'll always need that team. If you can't do it alone, look at your neighbor and ask for help. Thank you.
Sorry, organizers, back to my slides. Way forward. I put up some tips that I could share with my fellow women in terms of way forward and to just help us execute our investigative stories better. Yeah, be ready to network, because it's important for you to network and take the personal initiative to prepare a brief or a bio about yourself. They say opportunity comes to the better prepared. So if you have a biography about yourself and the work you have done, it will help sell you better. But then also women and journalists in general need to continue reading and explore new things for self-improvement. And then we also need to be able to draft serious collaboration and partnership clauses to avoid scoop elements, betrayals, and tip-offs. Next slide, which is my last slide. There are so many organizations that also provide training and mentorship sessions. So we should be able to look out for those. And as well as fellowships, we are lucky that women have an upper edge in these things. There are so many people that want to better us. And then also be able to work with credible donor institutions and personal branding, write well, accurately, interestingly, and investigate and investigative pieces, but also strive as much as possible to be corrupt-free. We say that our profession is not for those that want to get rich, so corrupt-free is what will make you have a stronger, credible foundation. And in conclusion, my best story, I could say, is one that I've not yet done. So this is a philosophy that my neighbor shared with me in office that helps me keep yearning for better investigative pieces. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Cecilia, Linda, Nyakerario, who is joining us online, and Nancy. And now back to our audience. This is the time for your questions. Feel free to ask any questions from our panelists. They'll be willing to answer your questions. Thank you. Yes. Do you have a mic for him?
Thank you so much, my dear colleagues, for your illuminating discussions on these important issues on partnerships and collaborations. I'm sorry I don't remember the exact colleague who mentioned a very important point. In her opening remarks, I think she said something to the effect that I think newsrooms and media personnel generally, we are moving away from issues to do with scopes and exclusives to doing stories for the public good. But I was wondering whether this is actually true, and whether we are better off. I guess the question I'm asking is, are there particular stories we are better off doing collaboratively? Because I don't think we are going to do every story collaboratively. What sort of stories require us to collaborate across newsrooms, across countries? Yeah, I think that needs to come out clearly in our discussions. Yeah, I think if give an example of the COVID challenge, which we've battled over the last 2 years now. I've seen it both in Uganda and Kenya, where broadcaster newsrooms had to sort of, to raise awareness, the public awareness, they came up with, can I call them single bulletins? Like they would broadcast these bulletins at the same time from one single point. that was very important. So I guess I'm saying it depends on the stories we need to collaborate on. We can't collaborate on each and every story. The bigger the issue for the public, I think the better for us to collaborate and partner with each other. I guess it wasn't a question, but I was just raising an issue. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. I think I'm the one who raised the issue of scoops and exclusives. Yes, we have them, and they're not going away. Like you've said, there are certain issues that require collaboration for you to come up with something of public good. It has to be maybe something on financial flows, like Cecilia talked about, something of, maybe corruption that is even crossing the border, yeah? But you as a journalist, there's always that exclusive, that scoop that you always come up with, that is yours. In as much as we want to move away from being a lone writer, but then I also feel there are certain stories that if we work together with someone, you are able to come up with something that is quality, not quantity.
Just to add to that, just take an example of the story that has been probably the most mentioned in this conference, which is the Pandora Papers. Did any of us get the wind of it? We only got to know about it when it came out. And so it goes back to the point that I said, work with credible sources, because I don't think people will be out there people who are credible enough will be in a rush to, spread whatever you're working about. But then also in this era, we are faced with similar challenges, and therefore it's important for us to put our heads together to work on things like trafficking. Who is not facing that challenge? So many girls are going out to the United Arab Emirates for employment every day. And so this is something that you can actually start from Uganda, Kenya, because the routes are known. Rwanda, Kenya, Tanzania, up to Dubai, where the children are. But then also there are other instances like terminal illnesses in Kenya. I don't know how cancer is like in Kenya. But then Uganda, it's a very big issue. And so these are issues that we could be able to tackle collectively. I don't think the issue of scoops and exclusives would be a big problem in this era. It's just execution that can help us address these issues better.
Thank you, thank you. Anyone else with a question? You introduce yourself, your name, and your organization. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Sharon Kiburi. I'm a freelance data journalist. And my question is going to go to Nancy Aguta. You mentioned being in Nata Blue Fellowship, which is apparently, I happen to be a member of it as well. It's nice to see you. So I was just wondering, in your investigative work, when you're looking for data and information, do you ever face challenges, and how do you handle them?
Hi, Sharon. Yeah, as part of the fellowship, actually, as an investigative journalist, we face so many challenges, maybe getting even the data itself. So sometimes you want to handle a story about, just an example of, there's some kind of misappropriation in Homa Bay County. So then you have the content ready, but you don't have data to back it up with. So in this case, in as much as we are facing all these challenges as a journalist, you can always talk to a fellow journalist, just ask if they have any, anybody who can help them with some data, or CSOs, communities, organizations that deal with certain issues. So from there, you're able to take whatever data they have on the ground and use it for your own story.
Yes, yes.
My name is Alphonse. I'm a student journalist from DSTAR. I'd like to find out if there's competition in these collaborations that you have. Feel free to answer, any in the panel.
Thank you, Alphonse. I think any of you can respond to this about competitions in executing investigative journalism projects.
I think I can go, because I mentioned collaborative over competitive approaches. So I wouldn't say, because you're dealing on a project at a time, so the idea for that particular project is to bring in people who are specialized in a specific area and come together. So per project, there won't be competition, but probably in different projects you may happen to be doing, like Africa Uncensored does fact-checking, so does Code for Africa. Although, yeah, again, just trending away from the scoops and breaking news angle, just trying to focus on what you can do best without having been hindered by who's going to break news first, would assist in maybe just doing a better job as you are in the organization.
I mean, I also think competition may only come in when the people you are working with, you don't trust them. So you find maybe Cecilia will take some kind of content to our competition. If this is the Star, you take some kind of information to the Nation, and they'll also start their own investigative piece. Then you'll just hear a wind of it, that these people are also doing the same story. So there's that, you know, a rush to get this thing done with.
I also think the answer to competition just lies in collaborating more, because we are in the same field. So if for instance, there's something that you need to work with, it is better for you to come on board with other media houses, and then you'll be able to draft clauses that will then bind you people together to ensure that no one leaks information before it's published on its given date.
Thank you. There's a gentleman. You can ask your question.
My name is Shemei Agabo from Uganda, from the African Institute for Investigative Journalism. At the African Institute for Investigative Journalism, one of our cores is collaboration program. And just recently, I think in 2020, we held a Uganda Investigative Journalism Conference back at home. And we're trying to sit down with the investigative journalists from across the newsrooms, reflecting on the role and the state of investigative journalism. What we realized, or what we found out, was shocking, that actually newsrooms back at home are sort of in a competition. We sort of are driven off the public interest mission, and we are trying to meet deadlines and beat newsroom deadlines. It is shocking and surprising that newsrooms, especially back at home where I come from, I don't know what is happening here in Kenya or across Africa, but such conversations and sit down, they sort of break the barriers and trying to promote the spirit of journalism. Now, to my question will be, how do we develop editorial policies that safeguard the spirit of collaboration? Because what we see as investigative journalists or journalists from different newsrooms, we come together to put a piece. There are all these sort of safeguards that sort of, how can I call it? They sort of cage how we perform and how we work and our touch to stories. How do break such barriers? Then also lastly, for me, it will be the point or the aspect of collaboration as per se, because now it's becoming a buzzword and we are getting used to it. It's cool and relatable to say we are collaborating, but actually there is no impact. There's no impact. You see, people love saying we are collaborating, but inside there is a competition. But how do we take on this task to bring about impact? Thank you so much.
Thank you. Our colleague here has brought up two issues: the competition issue, which is keeping on repeating itself, and editorial policies. Maybe in 1 minute, what are your thoughts around editorial policies in regard to collaborations in investigative journalism projects? Nancy?
Editorial policies to put on collaboration. I think in most of these collaborations that happen, there are no, in our newsroom it is an informal collaboration. So it's not written anywhere that if I have an investigative piece, I'm supposed to go to so and so and so and so. But then I think one thing we need to do is we can just have probably a policy that says that when you have a story that is maybe crossing the borders or a story that is of interest,
you can be able to partner with 2 or 3, organizations or human rights organizations or some of the organizations that we are friends with that can help you to do the story. In as much as this thing is not, I think many newsrooms might not be able to put it as part of their editorial policies, but I think it is something that is worth the discussion, something that is worth being talked about so that we see how to go forward, so that we, in as much as we are working on a story, we have all the issues outlined clearly for both the parties so that it can also prevent competition, as you put it.
Nyakerario, are you still online? The issue of collaborations in terms of editorial policies in our newsrooms.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you. Well, I think if there's one editorial policy that every newsroom should take keen is confidentiality. And I've seen this, also choosing your team very well to understand that there are stories and investigative projects that are of interest and don't have to go out there. And you really, knowing who you work with and who you're collaborating with and who your team is, that will be very important. But also letting them understand the importance of confidentiality of these projects, and any information about these projects is very, very important. And that will be something that will protect, the information that is revolving around an investigative project not going out there, because I understand, once it's out there, then every other newsroom will want to execute a story, especially when it's a hot story. Everyone wants to, to publish and produce a hot story. So confidentiality is really key as a policy.
Or just a response or a comment? Oh yeah, Koros there.
Yeah, thanks a lot for your input. I'm also thinking about freelancers. How can they collaborate? They might not have the resources that newsrooms enjoy, but is it possible for them to also do investigative projects across countries, even within the country? What are your thoughts about that? What are the opportunities for freelancers to collaborate?
Okay, Cecilia.
Freelancers just have the same opportunity that staff have. For instance, in the New Vision, freelancers sign contracts, so you are part of the organization. And in fact, some of the great investigative stories that we've had over time have been done by freelancers. So it's not that by virtue of them being freelance, you cannot take part in in an investigative story. The thing is, bring out your idea, sell it to the editor, pitch, and then you'll definitely be supported to execute it.
Thank you so much. It's already 10 o'clock and we are coming to a close for this session. Many thanks to my wonderful panel. Online Nyakerario, Omari, thank you so much, Nyakerario. Nancy Aguta, thank you so much. Cecilia Okoth from the New Vision in Uganda, thank you so much. And Linda Ngari, thank you so much. Thanks again, our wonderful audience, and see you next time. Thank you.